how to make my white chocolate and raspberry loaf cake, my favourite flavour combination in loaf cake form. Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel, where today I'm making one of my classic bakes from the blog, which is my white chocolate and raspberry loaf cake. This is one of those bakes that if I put like the photo of the slice on social media, everyone goes, what is that glorious beauty on the screen? Because the raspberries dappled through the sponge with white chocolate buttercream, a drizzle, even more raspberries on top. You know, I keep saying more and more stuff because it really is that loaded, but it's so easy to make. So I thought I would make it today for you on my YouTube channel. Of course, as always, I will put the full recipe in the description box below. I'll put a link to the blog post. Any useful bits that I use throughout the video, I'll put there as well. But either way, I hope you love this recipe as much as I do. So when it comes to the cake mix for this cake, it's super easy. It's based on a simple sponge of 4 ingredients of butter, sugar, eggs, and flour, with added little extras of the white chocolate and raspberries. But either way, 6 ingredients makes the most delicious, fruity, sweet sponge, and it is heavenly. So for this bake, I start off with some baking spread. You can use room temperature unsalted block butter if you want, but I find baking spread easier. I then also use caster sugar. This is golden caster sugar because it's what I have in the cupboard, but white caster sugar works really well as well. And then of course I have some eggs. I always use medium eggs, so it's a 4-egg recipe. If you want to use large eggs, it's more like 3 large eggs, but obviously weigh the eggs in their shells as always to try and get as close to 200 grams as possible. This is self-raising flour, as always in my bakes. If you ever want to make your own, I'll put how to make that in the description box below. But either way, self-raising flour is great. I then have some white chocolate callets here, or chocolate chips, whichever you want. But either way, a chopped up bar of white chocolate does also work. I tend to have ones about this size though, so that they don't completely disappear into the sponge. And then I have some fresh raspberries. I always prefer to use fresh raspberries, especially when it's more seasonal. Frozen raspberries will work, but it might make the sponge a little bit too soft, but you can also use freeze-dried raspberries in the sponge instead if you prefer. I'm just going to start by adding my butter to the bowl. You can of course, like I say, use the spread or the room temperature butter. Either way, add it in first. Then I add in my caster sugar. Like I say, both white and golden work well, so I've got a mix here. And then I'm just going to cream these two together until combined. Once these mix together, I'm going to add in my eggs. And then as I mix, I'm going to add in my flour as well. Once the cake mix is made, I'm just going to pour in my white chocolate chips and just leave a little for the top. Then I'm also going to add in most of my raspberries. And then I'm just going to mix these together gently and fold them through. Now that the cake mix is ready, I have grabbed my 2-pound loaf tin. As I've said before, in any loaf tin recipe, unfortunately there's absolutely no correlation as to why a 2-pound loaf tin is called a 2-pound loaf tin, because some arrive as 1 pound in size, some are 3 pounds. So I will link the exact one that I use in the description box so you can sort of get it as accurate as possible. Either way, the main rule with your loaf tins is only ever fill it 2/3 full, because that will prevent it from overflowing. If you have a lot of cake mix left, that does mean your tin is smaller than it theoretically should be. But either way, you can make some cupcakes with the spare batter. So what I'm going to do is pour the cake mix in, and then I'm going to top with the last little bits, and I'm going to show you a little trick to stop the fruit from sinking. And as I just pour my cake mix in, I'll make sure I spread it evenly. One little tip that I can give you for stopping the fruit from sinking, as it's a classic problem when you're baking with berries, is some of it I've already put in cake mix because I just want it to spread how it does. But the little bit I have left over, I'm actually just going to add a little sprinkling of flour onto the fruit like so. Just toss it in the flour, and then I'm going to sprinkle these on top with the last few chocolate chips, and it will mean that this fruit doesn't sink to the bottom and it will just dapple through the middle throughout perfectly. And then I just add them on top randomly, and then I add on the last few chocolate chips as well. So now everything is ready in the tin, I'm going to bake it in my preheated oven. This sort of cake does take about an hour because it's quite a dense amount of cake. But either way, bake it until the skewer comes out clean. And an extra tip when you're super careful is you can listen to the cake ever so slightly. If it's making sort of a bubbling, crackling sound, that means it's not quite fully baked yet and it needs an extra few minutes. But once it's baked, take it out of the oven and leave it to cool fully in the tin. So now that my cake has baked and cooled, you can see all the raspberries and the white chocolate on the top, and it's the most perfect delicious sponge ready to decorate. So I'm going to decorate it with a white chocolate buttercream frosting, and all this is block unsalted butter that is at room temperature, some icing sugar and some melted white chocolate all mixed together to a lovely, thick, luxurious frosting that we're going to decorate the top with some extra little bits of course. But either way, we're going to make this first. One massive tip I have is always use block butter. Don't use a baking spread or margarine like Stork, anything like that, Flora, because it's too oily, too soft, and it will result in a really sloppy frosting, which nobody wants. So make sure to use the block butter and you'll be absolutely golden. I'm just going to start by adding in my room temperature butter, and then we're going to beat this on its own until smooth. And then to the beaten butter, I'm going to add my icing sugar and mix it in really, really well. Now that's beaten, I'm going to pour in my white chocolate as well, and it's melted until smooth and cooled for 10 minutes. And there you have a deliciously smooth white chocolate buttercream. So now that my frosting is ready, I have my piping tip. Today I'm using a 1M piping tip. I will link this in the description box below, and also my favourite piping bags. There's a good grip on these piping bags, so it's much easier to control and pipe. And then I also have some melted white chocolate, raspberries, freeze-dried raspberries, and some white chocolate chips. So we're just going to have fun decorating, and it's going to be perfect. So I'm just going to add my buttercream to my piping bag. I find it easier to tighten the piping bag at the top so you have better control. Then all I'm going to do is basically pipe a little rope along in rows to get really pretty decoration. Now I'm just going to randomly decorate with some of my fresh raspberries all over the top. Then I'm just going to add a melted or white chocolate drizzle on top. And then I'm going to add on some freeze-dried raspberries as always. And then finally, I'm just going to add on a few extra white chocolate chips. And of course, this is how you make my white chocolate and raspberry loaf cake. Such a delicious loaf cake recipe, so easy to make. One of my favourite flavour combinations in the world of the sweetness of white chocolate and the tartness of the raspberries. It is perfect in my eyes. So I hope you guys utterly adore this recipe as much as I do. Like I've said, the full recipe will be in the description box below with a link to the blog post. Any useful bits that I've used, I will also link in the description box. Make sure to give the video a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already, and then come back next time for something utterly scrumptious as always. Enjoy!